Hey everyone, this is Dan here, CEO at VisualFizz with Cieana, our first guest of our very own VisualFizz Growth Series. We're pretty excited because we are going to be talking about quite a bit in industrial and manufacturing and B2B marketing. This is a very conversational topic. We're going to just have some fun. Cieana is, at time of recording, our newest team member, and I'm quite pumped. I'm going to let Cieana give her introduction, and then we're going to jump right in.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. Yeah, no, I have been in B2B industrial marketing for 20 years. What? How'd that happen? Got my start with a pump engineering and rebuilding company in Chicago because I'm a Chicago gal through and through, and was there for 9 years, just honing my skills, learning the craft, and then really have spent the last 2 decades riding the waves of technology adoption, social media, content marketing, really embracing the digital media marketing space. And so it's really great to join the Visual Fizz team. What's really fun about it is that I actually used to be a client. So I've worked with the team previously and was just so impressed with all of their skill sets and everything they bring to companies who need media marketing partners. So glad to be here today. Glad to talk about all things digital media marketing.
Yeah, and there's a lot. And I appreciate that, Sienna. We're excited to have you. The first thing I want to chat about is kind of your definition of what differentiates B2B buyers from B2C buyers. I know I'm jumping right in, but I think that's such an important topic. And I'll kind of give you my own opinion after, but I'm curious to hear what you think really differentiates the two.
Yeah, for sure. So again, I started out my career in that B2B space, a services provider company, really working with other larger organizations for these complex products. And as I have zigzagged through my career, I did find myself at an awesome nonprofit that did more D2C marketing. And so they are two very different animals. Some people, really understand that D2C moves much quicker. You're really talking with the client. You have to have that positioning and messaging crafted, executed. You get the data pretty fast on if your marketing is working, and then you can iterate and tweak and move on from there. The difference is with B2B, because you're working with different organizations and there's so many stakeholders, your positioning and messaging is still important, but the difference is that you've got much longer sales cycles. And then you've got the added challenge internally of making sure that every salesperson within your organization is consistently delivering that same message of value from the org. So there's always a tendency where companies really want to talk about themselves. Hey, we do this and we're awesome and we're great. But I think that if the marketing team really adds value because they're trying to help stakeholders within the organization reframe the messaging about what is the value that you're really providing to your customers. And so ultimately, you're going to tap your storytellers within your marketing team to find that story, the value that's provided, and share those stories for credibility purposes, which is really key for longer B2B relationship building.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think you have to consider that it's purchased by committee most of the time, that there's always a key champion like within the process. And like for B2C, I mean, you can have a rather expensive product or service still for sale, but there's generally only one decision maker, the one consumer, maybe a couple of individuals. In B2B, I think you really have to consider one, that there's going to be a lot more people kind of involved. So it's really by committee. And two, the investment is generally larger and the sales cycle is longer. And so I agree with you. One thing I always actually mention as well when I speak B2B sales is, in a way, there is a differentiation, but in many ways, it's the same thing because you speak to an individual at a larger organization. The entity is simply a shell. And at the end of the day, the individual is the buyer. They have to have an emotional decision to work with you or to buy your product or service. And so I think you have to always remember the B2C side of selling when you're moving into B2B because, people are emotional buyers. They buy based on feeling a lot of times.
Mhm.
And they have to, like for our services at Visual Fizz, they have to, one, believe in the work that we're going to do and achieve it well, but also they have to like the people. As simple as that.
100%. People want to buy from people they know. And I think that's huge in B2B selling, right? You're out there building relationships, and a lot of in-house marketing departments are doing account-based management, and they're trying to figure out who are those teams that they're targeting and how do they find the champions within their organizations to keep delivering that message and selling that value internally. So that's why it's really powerful when a marketing department can create those tools to help their customers really do that kind of internal selling for that value.
Yeah. And I really want to talk about today even a further kind of step into B2B, which is industrial manufacturing, technology, construction, what I call like infrastructure or VisualFizz called build. That is a different beast in and of itself because when you sell SaaS, B2B SaaS, generally speaking, those decisions are still pretty quick. It can be from a day to a few weeks, unless you're talking enterprise, it could be longer. But in our world, specifically where VisualFizz shines, are again these infrastructure driven projects, and their sales cycles can last anywhere from a couple of months to a couple of years, and oftentimes that sale is 5, 6, and sometimes even 7 figures. And so we support B2B buyers and B2B companies that have B2B buyers in a bit of a different way. And really, that's driven around, we always kind of learn this, what, 7 touch points, which I think in today's day and age has probably tripled,
Yeah,
especially in
it's
B2B.
probably more like 14.
Yeah, at a minimum, right?
Mhm.
And even then, like there's so many pieces that are involved in supporting these industrial B2B brands that, rely on relationships, but also are seeing their own market shift with the addition of venture capital money coming in, with AI, with more focus on tech, with possibly a change in how account-based marketing, as you mentioned, and sales processes work. I'm curious to hear your thoughts on even what you've seen over your career as it pertains to a lot of these industries that we focus on.
Yeah, I mean, my answer might sound basic, but I always kind of return to the foundation, right? Do you have a product market fit? Is your product so valuable that there is a buyer available at the end of the day, right? And in manufacturing, most manufacturing sector cases, the answer is yes, right? We're always going to need steel beams. We're always going to need concrete and materials for building. We're going to need manufacturing processes for almost, you can look around your house right now at every item that exists. An engineer had to design it and then a manufacturer had to make it, right? So your product exists to serve a purpose. And I think what's really helpful is when you think about marketing, it's really about making sure that people know that you're there and you exist and your product is there to solve the problem or address the issue or be part of their process. And that's really what it's about, right? Putting your message in front of the right person at the right time so that you can keep moving your business forward. And many times businesses have to pivot a little bit or modify or adjust with the changing times. And that's totally normal. And when those times happen, I think that's when it's really critical to go back and say, okay, just because we've been marketing our company this way for the last 50 years, is the message that served us the last 50 years going to help us to get to the next 50?
Hmm.
And a lot of times, CEOs and C-suite, they're busy doing their thing, right? They're making their product, they're serving their customers. So I think it's really important that, the CMOs and the VPs of marketing have their fingers on that pulse of no, it's time that we really look at our brand. It's time that we look at all of our channels. It's time that we take our business strategy and make sure that that's really translating into our market strategy and then the appropriate channels and how we reach out to people. Again, we have to have that mix of outbound and inbound. And I think that's where I've always concentrated was digital inbound. So my wheelhouse was always kind of top of funnel content generation and demand gen because demand is out there, right? People want your product. They just don't know it exists yet, or their understanding of what it is maybe very narrow and we have to widen it. So I think it's really important to take a look at that and then assess, what can be done to keep going forward.
Yeah, you brought up a good point that they want the product or service, but they don't really always need it like that at that moment, right? And oftentimes I found in B2B and just in marketing in general, we're very reactive creatures. We like to react based on trends or based on our feelings. And sometimes that can mitigate or on the other hand, like it can either challenge or it can help us or hurt us. And I think that's the big thing around kind of this emotional decision making in a lot of these more serious commodity driven businesses or in manufacturing industrial, because within the marketing realm, we focus on awareness and we focus on conversion, right? And for everyone who doesn't know, it's that standard funnel. We need individuals, we need stakeholders, we need buyers to know that we exist, simply because they may not be ready to buy until another person tells them it's time, or until something changes in the market, or until their supply is low, whatever that kind of spring effect is to get them there. But I think ultimately the challenge for, like you mentioned, the CMOs and the marketers is we are not always given that pipeline of the timeline to develop and maintain the larger buyer funnel, the funnel that really can, again, last 6 months to a year. And when you're focused on, again, commodities or large ticket item manufactured goods or technology. For example, we have clients that sold machinery that cost $50,000 or a couple $100,000. You really don't need that machine until you need that machine. Generally speaking, I don't think customers are thinking 5 years in advance. It's, oh, our competitor just bought this state-of-the-art machine. We have to keep up. Or wow, all of our products here internally in-house are dated. We need to sell those off and buy new machinery. And that might happen overnight. It may not. But I think the big thing is that for a lot of our buyers, they need to be ready, available at all times, and they have to be building those relationships months or years in advance because, the buying funnel again is long, but they need to know you exist. I think that's a really big challenge that we face in these industries is because we're so used to the sales focused mentality around a salesperson calling and saying, "Hey, how can I help you?" or cold calling. Nowadays, people are doing, I believe I did some research, I think 75% of something in the 70% of decisions are made even before they pick up a phone. They're going on the website, they're going on social channels, they're going on sometimes like the review websites, whatever it
Right.
may be, but they're making their decision before they ever talk to you. And so your whole digital presence has to build up to that moment when they actually give you a call. And if
Yes.
you do, now you're in the competition with two or three others, maybe up to a few, or maybe they're inviting you to the RFQ. But at that point, you've already beat out much of your competition, but you have to be there in order to actually play the game.
That's
I
right.
think that's what I found quite a bit with some of our clients and as well as some of their own clients as well.
Yeah, 100% agree with you. I mean, 95% of your buyers are not ready to buy right now. But when they are ready to buy, you need to be top of mind. And that's why
Hmm.
investments in brand are going to be huge. I also think investing in brand is going to be hugely important right now with the way AI is changing how people search and do research. But I will note that people are really good at, I think, sussing out what is AI generated search
Hmm.
results versus, what is real. And they're doing a little bit more deeper digging. So, for example, they might start with an inquiry and look at the AI response overview, and then they're going to go back and search a second time with a longer string keyword string. And so, if you're not building that sort of bottom of funnel content that addresses or includes the longer string content, then you're really going to miss out on the AEO optimization. So I would push everyone in the era of AI, keep doing your SEO because that's still hugely important.
Oh yeah, and it's really let's get into SEO. I like that, but I see it so much as an evolution. People think SEO is dead. SEO is not dead. It simply has moved over to AEO, which is driven around again AI for people who have not done the research. And really all it is it's a more content driven response versus when we're used to searching Google for many, many years, we search best blank in blank, best agencies in Chicago. It's pretty straightforward. Nowadays, people are actually, funny enough, searching with longer form phrases like best agencies in Chicago for technology and manufacturing for mid-sized companies. Where can I find it? And I found a lot of people are actually starting to use voice to ask these questions, me being one of them. And so you get a lot more depth in your question, which is great because AI, all these different platforms are starting to really dig into all of the resources that the internet provides you, not just your website, but everything externally and internally to answer those questions, which is, again, it's another version of SEO. The search
Right.
engines have simply
Right.
become the AI engines.
Right.
But I
And
want to
I
dive into some, oh,
and I
go ahead,
and I
please.
well, and I brought that up because I think it's really important for manufacturing companies and companies in these really industrial spaces to think about their target audiences, right? Because I've heard some companies say target demographic, they don't really use that stuff. They're not on social channels, they're not doing this. And I'm my response is your audience 10 years from now are going to absolutely be tech native. So you
Yep.
have to be developing this now because, people are changing. Your demographic is changing. So keep
Oh
that in
yeah.
mind as you're making your, 5-year plans, 10-year plans moving forward.
Yeah. And I'd even argue they've already changed. Right now, VisualFizz at time of this recording is almost 10 years old, and we've worked with these companies for quite a while. I know it's crazy, and we've seen a shift into one of a few things. Venture capital has played a huge part over the past few years in purchasing multi-generational, what we call boring businesses. They love them. They love the infrastructure-driven businesses because they make money, they're sound, they're in demand, and they make sense. And so, though we always hear about huge software purchases, what we don't always hear is about the venture capital companies that purchase cold storage facilities. They centralize all the operations, and their goal is to ultimately sell that out to a larger asset. But now you're finding if you are a mom and pop or a few locations versus one of these venture-backed multi-billion-dollar deals, you have a gorilla in the room that you have to compete against. If it's not the VCs and the PE companies, then the other piece of it is simply that these are, again, what I would call heritage companies or multi-generational. Oftentimes, if it's not your company and it's your competition, it is now going to the grandchildren or the children of the original founders. It's going to new buyers. It's going to sometimes employee-owned
Yep.
ESOPs.
Yep.
And the thing is, these guys all want to see change from something that's been around for a long time because they know you have to compete and evolve, or you may not make it the next 50 years, especially with, again, kind of big private equity money going into that space, which it never did at this rate. And I think that's really important to acknowledge too, that the buyers have changed. And where you're seeing this, I have talked to a lot of founders or owners where like, nope, yep, no, we're good, we're sound. And I think it's not a threat, but I do think that the entire market is simply going to change outside of handshake deals. They'll always be there, but they're I think they're becoming much less prevalent in today's day and age.
Yeah, I would agree with you. And again, I come from the pump industry, right? Pumps they're everywhere, right? They're pumping clean water to your kitchen sink. They're making sure you have electricity overhead, right? So to me, when I hear boring, I'm like, that's not boring. Like
Oh, I
these
agree.
these industrial pieces of equipment are so critical. And that's where I think the marketing and the storytelling about look at all these amazing things that have been built for the world we live in and how, they're supporting so many communities. So to me, I'm like, I'm on a mission to make industrial pumping equipment exciting or industrial equipment, exciting because it is to
It
me.
is.
And I think that's something that these organizations forget that there are all these amazing stories inside their companies that should be told. And I
Yeah.
think that that's, part of where marketing can come in because especially like with a merger and acquisition, when you're taking these companies and you're consolidating them, well, you have a new story to tell here, right? So how are you going to tell it? And on the flip side, when you've got mergers and acquisitions, it also creates room for these newer niche companies to come in and say, hey, we have a technology that isn't
Mhm.
100 years old and it works better. Right. And so no matter how you look at it, you're still going to need marketing and media to help you tell that story. And you're going to need partners who know how to position yourself in the market and what that strategic advantage is.
Yeah, actually, you bring up a good point, which I want to talk through. It's something that Visual Fizz has coined for a long time. It's called what I call responsible branding. Many of our clients have been around for a long time, 30 years up to 155 years. And I'm a big believer that when you're in these industries, you have to celebrate your heritage, but also understand that you're going to continue to evolve. You're right. The technology isn't from 1950. We appreciate the experience and the established brand of the 1950s 75, 80-year-old brand and company, but we need to know that that company is constantly innovating because our demands are for 2030, 2040, not for 1965. And so what I believe that we do quite well here at Visual Fizz is, again, responsible branding, which is really ensuring that like we celebrate the past while focusing in on the future. And one thing you noted, which I thought was interesting, actually going full circle back to B2C, was I like to treat B2B brands especially when it comes to branding and the way that we portray them on the web, almost as if we are a little bit B2C. And I don't want that to scare anybody off. No, we're not creating, bubble text for industrial brands, but why shouldn't a website for a highly commoditized product like steel or concrete or tubing or whatever you might sell be any worse by default than the latest beverage company. They surely are going to look different, and the call to actions and the user experience and flows will look different. But at the end of the day, what you're looking for is the cleanest, best brand that makes it as easy for customers to understand who you are, what you offer, and how do they get in touch, and what basically the short end of what's in it for me question.
Yes. Yes.
But we don't want to make cookie cutter because we, not to knock it, but a lot of agencies see the low hanging fruit of these types of companies and say, yeah, let's just put together a template website and call it a day. I'd argue you could probably get a better template for a consumer brand and call it a day. But for B2B, when it's so focused on such an intense buyer, you really need to actually invest the time, energy, and money into something that's going to convince them. Because I always say this, and I know I'm coming from the marketing side, I'm a little biased. You can build a new website, or you can invest in SEO, AEO, or you can invest in paid media, whatever it is. And I don't want to say assure you, but I feel very confident that your return on investment is going to happen much faster than the B2C side, given again, simply the size of the purchase. And I kind of convince folks to say, hey, if you make one sale from this new website, you paid for it. And that's a pretty cool thing. So I'm curious about your thoughts about this responsible branding and then kind of that B2C approach for B2B.
Yeah, no, I agree with it, right? And it's about taking strategy and tactics from what works, right? And when you've been doing it long enough, you kind of know what works, but you're also keeping a finger on what can I do to change my approach a little bit and see if we can optimize it further. And so I think as companies are considering AI technologies and how to integrate that into the MarTech stacks. I think the companies that are really becoming very clear about who their target customer really is, and then internally making sure they have the foundations internally in place to support that marketing and sales enablement strategy is key. And that means, looking at your organization, what data is inside of it, who touches it, right? How are the marketing teams and sales teams working together to work with, 10 plus B2B buying teams, right? And so understanding the systems and processes internally so that you can measure, did our investment really work? I think that's really key for people to kind of stop and say, this is what we're going to do, but how are we going to measure it to make sure we can really see our return on ad spend or return on website development investment or return on SEO efforts, right? And SEO takes a long time too to really show and pay off. And sometimes, people create content and they don't realize they might start out thinking, oh, I want to create content, drive a lot of traffic to my site. But really that content is training LLMs and then they're showing up in the AI overview. So I think, it's about educating B2B buyers about what's really needed to show success and how to measure that. So some education is required there.
Yeah. Oh yeah, there's quite a bit. And it changes literally every day. And I mean, I count on the team all the time to help me understand the nuances of each of their verticals, whether that's SEO or paid search or, the newest in web. Because it's impossible to keep up with everything, especially just today with AI changing on a daily basis.
Yes, there are all these verticals, but I think more companies are starting to hire for integrated marketing people because they actually want to see how does a new website with SEO efforts, with content marketing, email marketing, social marketing, how do we level all of these things up as a force multiplier? Right? That's really what's important to these B2B industrial companies. How do we take all of our efforts and have an impact? Right. And so I think it's
Hmm.
really important also for companies to have almost like an agreement between sales and marketing. What does marketing own? What does sales own? Because sometimes there are things that marketing, they don't have any influence over. So that can be really challenging for them as well. So I would strongly suggest that internal teams kind of have a plan. Like this is what we own, this is what you own, and then help each other
Hmm.
be accountable.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. That's something that VisualFizz is actually doing further looking. We're, as an agency that's so integrated with so many of our clients on complex sales cycles and processes, one of, I think, in my opinion, our major differentiators is that we see marketing really as the first step. Now, there's a lot that goes into that first step, but the integration within sales and CRM and funnels and what happens actually post transaction, I think that's something that many agencies tend to forget. They know how to run paid ads or search or whatever they're doing, and they get to conversion, and then they generally report on that. If that, to be quite honest, because I've seen some bad reports in my days. But what I found is to really differentiate Visual Fizz is that we work directly with sales teams. We work on CRM development. We work on sales pipelines, funnels, etc. And what I think is most unique is we work on post-sale engagement, which ultimately expands lifetime value of customers, LTVs, because it's great to win a customer. For all intents and purposes, let's say we won a $50,000 customer for our client. What do we know about that sale besides the fact that it's a $50,000 customer? Not a whole lot because we're just given the information, and most agencies split off from there and look for another customer. What we're trying to do is still look for that new customer, but now we have someone in the door who we being us and our client are now, they're spending money with them. Now, how do we take that $50,000 customer and turn them into 100,000, into a $500,000 customer, into a partnership? And I think that's really important to acknowledge because it's substantially easier to scale a client that's already an existing client than trying to win a new customer or
Mm-hmm.
client. And that's really important for our focus here at Visual Fizz is, all right, we've won this person, we've won this team, we won this organization for our client, but we don't want the LTV, lifetime value of customer, to be $50,000. We want them to be a 10-year client that's worth $1 million. But how do we get them there? Of course, that's heavily drawn on the sales team and then the actual product or service that that company offers. But we can help expand that through things like email marketing, surveys, good user experience through the website and kind of internal networks if they have those. Each case is situational, but we need to make sure that we're constantly thinking about the post conversion metrics just as much as the pre conversion metrics. And again, I think that's an area where a lot of our competition is not touching
Mm-hmm.
because it dives way too deep into the data, and some of
Mm-hmm.
them just simply don't do that or can't do that.
Mm-hmm. Right, right. And not everyone is going to become an extension of your marketing team. And I think that's what's great about Visual Fizz is we are an extension of marketing teams and we're going to learn about your product and your business strategy in order to make sure the marketing is effective. So I think that's what sets us apart for sure. And when I was a client, conversely, I had very specific goals that I wanted to achieve. And I was very clear about we don't have to hit all of these marks. Like, these are the top 3 things I want to accomplish. And your team did it. And you did it better and better. I think we did 3 consecutive campaigns together. And each one was better as we went along because we were taking all of the learnings and applying it and doing better each time. So that's what I had wanted to see out of an agency partner was can they do the work? Can they do it well? Can they improve every time? And also, can they take all these tasks, that I could do, but I had other things that I was uniquely required to do. And so having an agency partner that could take that off my plate was really helpful. So I think that's important also as marketing teams are looking at all of the things being asked of them to consider, what partner do I need right now? And I think with marketing agencies, sometimes there's just one specialty offered, but I think it's great when you can find a team that when you need website redevelopment, they're there. When that marketing need changes over to consistent SEO support or PPC campaigns seasonally or whenever they're needed, that partner is available to provide those services when you need them. So, I think that's huge. I think that's important.
Yeah, I agree, and obviously, again, I'm a little biased because we were that partner.
Yeah.
But I actually that leads me to my next question, which is a little bit less technical and sales focused, which is really around relationships. I've worked at a lot of agencies before starting Visual Fizz, both as a contractor and a full-time employee, and I know many agency owners, and it's interesting just to see the differences between every single agency you work at. Some I don't want to say care about this more or less, but relationships are so important in the agency space. You have to build trust. And I always say, when we start with a new client, we're going through a honeymoon phase over the first 90 days. I call it that because we're kind of getting to know each other for the first time. We're building a relationship. And what I say is if the honeymoon phase goes well, the first 90 days, and we've really built this relationship up, we've built trust, we're kind of getting married. Like we're in it for the long haul. We're going to be with you for years. We're going to financially trust each other. We're going to be accountable for each other. So it really is that. And communication is also hugely important, both in personal relationships and in business relationships.
Right.
We are all human.
Hmm.
We try not to, but we do sometimes make mistakes. And as long as there's transparency and communication and just understanding, hey, this person was late, was sick and they couldn't make that deadline. Can we have one more day? Versus skipping out on a deadline, those types of things. I find that our relationships and our clients who have that understanding kind of complementary to our own like
Hmm.
thought process and the way that we do things, they work with us for many, many years. So I'm curious, like if you were to say one thing that defines a truly quality relationship between an agency and a partner, a client, what would that be for you?
Do they do what they say they're gonna do? It's really that simple, and I think that goes for everyone you work with. It's you should do the thing you say you're gonna do. And if stuff happens, stuff happens. That's where the open lines of communication come in. But I think, in my experience in B2B in-house marketing teams, there's a lot of like, hurry up and wait. Like just
Hmm. Oh
there's
yeah.
this pressure to do stuff, but you can't always move forward with it because you're waiting on something else or someone else or a lot of people. So it is nice when you have already established a relationship with an agency and they know you and they've been supporting you as an extension of your marketing team. That whole hurry up and wait scenario becomes a lot easier to deal with when you've got a
Hmm.
partner at the ready to support you. So I hope
I
that
agree.
helps.
Yeah, no, it certainly does. We're gonna just ask a couple more questions, but I'm curious your thoughts because this is one that comes up so often, and we see this teeter-totter effect of exactly what I'm about to ask is agency versus in-house team. A lot of individuals, a lot of companies, they have that challenge, the internalized challenge. And let's say in our world, mid-market, they're a rather large organization, but most of the time for this scenario, our clients don't have fully fleshed out huge marketing teams like a B2C company might. B2C companies have a substantial team oftentimes, but B2B, even at a large scale, even some of our clients that do over $1 billion a year may have one marketing person, may not have any.
Hmm.
So let's assume in this scenario, it's a very small marketing team and a couple of specialists and maybe a
Hmm.
director level. In that case, do you hire up or do you bring on an agency? Or what is your kind of take on the different scenarios that different businesses may take on?
Sure. No, you're so correct about most industrial companies having 1 to 2 marketing people. It is surprising, but it's so real. And that's why a lot of them do need agency partners. And so it really depends, hiring decisions depend on the business's needs. There are some industrial companies that are so focused on being a sales-driven organization that they don't really value marketing. They think everything that happens from sales. And that's fine, but then they're really missing out on that whole brand awareness piece, right? And that's costing them and they don't even realize it. Then you have companies, B2B companies, industrial companies that really heavily prioritize industrial trade shows and events, very in person, because they know that that's where the relationships really get built is in person events. And so in those situations, you're going to prioritize having like an events director or, someone who can really manage all of the trade show logistics and then hopefully integrating the digital pre-event day of post-event marketing that goes with it
Mhm.
because all of those events require digital media, email marketing, social media outreach to make sure that those shows and in-person events are successful. So I think it's really about, again, the business strategy where businesses feel like they're going to really reach or meet their target audience, and then thinking critically about how does my digital media support our actual in-person interactions, right? Because that's what it should be doing. There should be messages and communications with content being delivered to people so that they can educate themselves. Because you're right, buyers are going to do research on their own. They're going to know 95% about your company and your product before they even talk to you. So make sure that they've got the right stories in front of them, the right information in front of them, and that it's easy to use. If they want to get information on a very complex product and they want to look at an engineering or a product catalog to see if they have to select a piece of equipment that fits in a custom configuration in their business, make that information easy for them to look at, because if it's not going to work for them, they're going to make that decision and like ignore you completely. But if there's a
Hmm.
possibility your product can work for them, help them get to that point of understanding quickly and easily. So I know that was kind of a roundabout way, but different businesses require different strategies. My main point is that digital should be part of your strategy, period.
Yeah, yeah, I completely agree. I mean, well, I will always agree to that one, especially as we've talked, about this for kind of quite a bit here. And I'll tell you my take on it. I do think if a company can't commit the effort and time from their internal staff to bring on an agency, they may have challenges, and especially agencies that aren't used to working with small teams that are pretty segmented. And how do I put it? Oftentimes the marketing department is not involved in a lot of major decisions at these large B2B companies. And so if you're not speaking directly with the say with the stakeholders of the organization, or the organization doesn't have kind of, how do I put it? I think in order to have a marketing agency be effective for complex B2B companies, you need an internal stakeholder no matter what. It doesn't have to be a marketing director, but there has to be somebody accountable. And I will say, in the best projects that we've worked on and the best relationships we've built, we've always had a lead stakeholder that understands the ins and outs of their business, who can ensure that we are constantly communicated with to develop everything else. And so it's not a lot of hand holding, but there needs to be some sort of connection. I think companies oftentimes think that throwing an agency into a problem is going to create a solution. But I always say from the beginning, it's a two-way street. And if we're not being fed the information that we need, whether it's your challenges, your future updates, your mergers and acquisition plan, all the stuff that we need to succeed, we're probably not going to be able to do the quality of work that we would like to be doing versus having that key stakeholder. And that doesn't mean handholding, doesn't mean all of their time is being spent on this, but it means a little bit of investment up front to ensure that we are proactively being involved. And then at that point, we could really run.
Mhm.
The other end of it is when you do have a pretty substantial team that runs a lot of the operations, it can still be useful to bring in an agency for very specific goals and staff augmentation. We're brought on a lot of very specific projects where if the company has 5, 8, 10 marketers, but they don't have a piece of the department and they don't want to hire on more full-time staff, it's a great opportunity to bring in an agency specifically for one or two services. So my thinking is full service. We are the agency department, or we are the entire marketing department as an agency. We've done that quite a few times. And sometimes we're just the special ops team that comes in and does the two, three things very, very well, very technically focused. And that's great too. But I think just having a great agency partner, even if someone gets sick or somebody goes on parental leave, or you need to fill small gaps, what I call kind of the pebbles amongst the rocks of the jar analogy, that's a great time to bring on an agency.
Right. And your analogy about, having sand, pebbles, and rocks, right? And understanding your team makeup. But I think for internal marketing teams, what they need to go in and do is they need to be participating on sales calls to hear the customer directly, because that's really where they're going to identify the need and the pain points for those customers, and then be helping and working with the sales team. Many of your sales rock stars already know how to sell and position the company. So then it's about, how do you duplicate and scale? How do you take your best salespeople and scale that? Well, marketing can come in and help take all of that messaging and make it consistent across the board. And so, but like you said, if you're dealing with a 2-person marketing team, how are they going to handle all of that work? So really figuring out, how, what in-house people should be doing versus how the agency partners can supplement. So those are really
Yeah.
important things to look at and evaluate.
Yeah, I agree. Delineating between the two is probably the key to a successful relationship. Well, we've talked about so much today, Cieana, and I appreciate your time. If you were to leave this conversation with one piece of advice for really anybody who may be working at an agency, seeking an agency, first-time marketers, long-term marketers, whatever it may be, if that one piece of advice that you always share, what would it be?
Man, my advice is always just keep learning. Never stop learning. Learn something new every day. And it could be about marketing in general. It could be a marketing specialty. It could be something new with AI. Get your feet wet, mess up, fail, try again. Learn about agencies that are nearby and what they might specialize in. There are a lot of great agencies out there. I'm biased. I love VisualFizz, but just my advice to everyone is just keep learning. Keep putting yourself out there to learn something new, even if it's challenging an idea or belief that you've held on to for so long. See if there's a different point of view out there and how you might maybe come at something a little differently. So, my advice, always keep learning.
But I love it. I totally agree with that. And I feel like I learned something, especially in the agency world. I mean, the amount of knowledge that our team has around steel and concrete and asphalt paving and corrugated boxes and
And pumps,
cannabis and pumps
motors, valves,
and higher ed and the state of, funding for a certain, it's just wild how much you learn at the
real
agency
estate,
space, which is
so much.
keeps you sharp because you have to be. Well, I appreciate so much. Just again, a quick shout out, Visual Fizz. We're a full service marketing agency. A lot of our focus is developing, scaling, and continuing to grow brands. Mid market is really our bread and butter, but we work with smaller organizations as well as enterprise. A lot happening in our space right now. We are making massive changes internally, all positive. So we're very excited and keep looking out for Visual Fizz and all of the updates that we're going to be making through 2026 and 2027. Cieana, again, I so appreciate your time and have a beautiful day. And we'll be chatting very soon. Thank you.